So I recently watched this anime called School Days. And if you've seen this anime, you know what it's about. Uh, but I didn't. I just was looking for romance anime, as I do, because I almost exclusively watch romance anime. And I saw it was this early 2000s anime. It looked cute, and I like early 2000s anime. I was like, this seems cool. I'll watch it. And it starts off like a pretty typical romance. There's, you know, the main character, and he likes this girl on the train, and he sees her every day, and he wants to talk to her, and all that. Little did I know that I was being blindsided by a psychological horror. I was not expecting the show to go down the way it did. Because basically, what happens in School Days is that the main character, and honestly, most of the characters, just keep making bad decisions that make the situation worse and worse and worse until it escalates so far that one of the characters in the last episode is brandishing a knife. And that's when I had to turn it off because I felt like I was getting traumatized from watching it. Um, it was just I was shooketh. I was not expecting to go from something that was cute and fun to something so deeply disturbing and a little bit traumatizing. I had to stop watching for a minute. I had to stop like watching serious things. I just had to watch something cute and fun for a while just to like hard reset. I actually ended up watching Cardcaptor Sakura for the first time after watching School Days, which I really enjoyed Cardcaptor Sakura. I think Sakura is an adorable main character, and I love the premise, and it's a magical girl anime, and I love it because I love shoujo anime. But I'm off topic. It got me thinking about why horror in general I have a hard time with because I am a little bit of a wimp when it comes to scary things. I'm a really empathetic person, and I just really can't handle watching characters who, while they may not be real, are subjected to really horrible shit, and it makes me sad watching it. It's just hard for me to watch. It's hard for me to want to watch it. But on the other hand, I really enjoy things that are spooky. Things like the game that you're seeing me play right now, Luigi's Mansion. Um, and what's interesting is I've always like ever since I was like a little kid, I've always had this big fascination and special interest in ghosts and ghost stories. And what is it about ghosts? I sometimes ask myself. Um, because you know, I mean, a lot of the things that are in horror, I mean, on an artistic level, I should enjoy. I enjoy a lot of horror elements. I like some of the emotional themes of horror, but what I don't like is gruesome, scary, and violent things. I don't like things that are really gory, or I don't like blood. I can't do like things that are fleshy and bloody and you know I just can't do the gross out horror. And so, I thought about it and I was like, well, maybe the reason that I like ghost stories so much is that I can experience those emotional themes through means that are not quite as bad, as violent as monster things or zombie movies. I really hate zombies. But I like ghosts because I feel like there's there's more of an ethereal, spiritual side to it. It's more of a otherworldly, mystical side. It's not really about things that are really physical and tangible. It's about things that are really quite evasive. It's about things that are not in the same sort of realm as you are, in the same sort of existence. It's about things that are kind of beyond the physical, as Alfred once said. Um, so yeah, so I've always kind of had this fascination with ghosts and stuff, and I think part of that is because I grew up on Luigi's Mansion. It's funny, when I was about 5 years old, my family went to Disneyland, and I got really scared on the Indiana Jones ride, but for some reason I was not scared at all by the Haunted Mansion. And that's really interesting to me. I mean, that's probably partly because I played Luigi's Mansion, probably, so I was probably used to ghosts. But I've always had this kind of uh, keen eye for things like haunted houses and specifically like haunted mansion type things and things that are a bit dark and spooky, but not scary. See, I feel like there's kind of a spectrum of scariness, I suppose. I feel like on one end you have spooky, and then you have eerie, and then creepy, and then you have scary. That's kind of right in the middle, and then you have horror, and then terror. I think I've had people in the past argue that maybe terror comes before horror. But I don't know, for some reason I feel like terror comes after horror. It kind of just seems fitting. I feel like terror is kind of like almost like a really visceral kind of harrowing type of emotion, while horror is very similar but just slightly less extreme, I suppose. But I watched this anime and it felt really harrowing watching it. I just felt really after watching it. I felt like uh, I couldn't think about anything else. I just had to sit with it for a while and just have to process what I watched. And so, I find myself thinking a little bit about why I really enjoy things that are spooky and kind of fun, kind of mystical, magical type of thing, and why I really don't like horror and scary things that I feel like are a lot more associated with like horror genres. I think one good example, besides Luigi's Mansion, is Coraline, specifically the book. I feel like Coraline really captures the essence, like the emotional themes of horror, without being too intense. I mean, the book is really creepy. Like it's even creepier than the movie, which I feel like the movie isn't really that bad. But the book is way creepier, and it has a lot of really creepy imagery, which I actually really like. I really like kind of creepy, sort of eerie, you know, imagery or media that makes you feel specifically kind of like you're being watched. I feel like sometimes when I interact with creepy or eerie media, I get this sense of like this feeling of being watched sometimes, which I kind of I honestly have a little bit of fun with. I kind of want to play with that emotion, whatever it is. But anyway, the book, it's got a lot of kind of grotesque imagery. But it's that Coraline herself is going to be okay in the end. There's no sense that, I mean, yeah, she's in danger, but that she's not gonna die. Because that would be, I don't know, that wouldn't make it children's horror. That would just make it horror, I guess. And I feel like that's why I have a much easier time interacting with children's horror than regular horror, I guess. Because I feel like with a lot of children's horror, there's kind of an out, for me, emotionally, where I can get emotionally invested in the story, but I don't have to feel sort of like I have to dread watching the characters have horrible things happen to them, or have to watch characters die really gruesome deaths. It feels like with children's horror I can kind of play with those emotional themes in a safer, more friendly environment that's still kind of spooky and creepy and eerie, I want to get back to that feeling of being watched. I've been trying for a long time to figure out where this comes from, but to give you an example, I have a really distinct memory of when I was about 10 years old. My family and I stayed up late, and we had a lot of the lights off, and we watched The Fiddler on the Roof, the old 60s movie adaptation. I don't know if it was it a movie first or a play first? I don't really know. I distinctly remember, I don't know if it was a specific DVD of it or if it was like something we watched on a streaming service, like Netflix, because I mean at the time that was kind of mostly what it was. It was mostly Netflix. I don't know if it was like VHS or something, but something about this specific copy of the movie that we watched, which I haven't really been able to find like this scene on the internet or anything. And I don't even know if I dreamed this or if it was real. I don't remember. Sometimes I question my memories about whether or not things actually happened the way I remember them. But I remember it was the intermission, and I remember my parents asked me to go get something from downstairs or something, and I remember while this intermission was playing, it was like, and I don't know if this is exactly what it was, so take it with a grain of salt, but what I remember is like a solid red background and just the text that said intermission. And I feel like I might be confusing that with, honestly, I might be confusing that a little bit with the Monty Python intermission bit, because I think I watched Monty Python for the first time around a similar time and age. But either way, what I remember, I guess it doesn't really matter what it looked like on the screen, because what really creeped me out at the time was what was playing in the background. It was this short clip of the fiddle going da 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 da. It was that like short clip of just the fiddle on loop playing over and over and over again, almost hypnotically. And I remember it feeling like there was no like reverb on it. There was no sense that it was playing from a distance or in a larger room. There was a distinct feeling of the fiddle being like right behind you. Like there's a distinct feeling of it being directly next to your ear or behind your shoulder. Like there's as if there's like a little devil playing the fiddle right on your shoulder. And I remember that really spooked me when I was in elementary school, like when I was 10. I mean, it didn't like affect me. I wasn't traumatized or anything, but I remember it was kind of eerie. It kind of creeped me out. And I remember my parents. So my parents asked me to go downstairs and get something, and of course, the basement is creepy and dark, and there's no windows, and you know, it was kind of an old house, so the walls were all like either wood paneling or like painted bricks or something. It was just kind of it was just kind of old and kind of dusty. And I think in that house we had an earwig infestation in the basement, which earwigs are like one of the three creatures that absolutely have no reason to be on the planet other than to be terrible. Um, that being mosquitoes, earwigs, and wasps. I hate all three of those things. But I'm on a tangent. I remember I went down to the basement and I had to like get something from the laundry room or something, and I just couldn't get that loop, that short bit of audio out of my head. And I felt like, in the basement, I felt like I was being watched. I felt like there was something constantly behind me, like that I couldn't see or find by turning around. I felt like there was just someone in there just watching me as I heard this fiddle in my head. And it was really kind of spooky, and it was creepy. And at the time, I mean, I had tried to get out of there as fast as possible and go back to where it felt safe around my family. But as an adult, I find myself kind of thinking about that experience, and I'm almost trying to figure out how to replicate it because, well, I guess this is a good time to mention that I'm working on a video game, and I'm not really quite ready uh, to introduce my game to the public. But basically, it's a game that takes a lot of elements from ghost stories. Well, actually, it just is about ghosts. But it's more cartoony. It's not horror. But I with this game idea, I really want to capture this sort of feeling of being watched and having this kind of feeling of like sort of like just an eeriness. It's so hard to explain this how I see it or feel it in my head. Another example, I guess, is when there was one time when I was playing Super Smash Bros. Melee, of all things. It was this was like more when I was a late teenager. Um, but so not super long ago, um, but I was playing the game late at night. It was like probably 2 in the morning, knowing myself, and I was playing the adventure mode or the classic mode or something. I don't remember what exactly, but basically, I got to the part where you fight Bowser, and there's this particular cutscene that plays right before you fight Bowser. And I remember something about the static sort of animation that was very robotic and kind of stiff. And something about like, I think there was like a low droning sound, like a real creepy kind of drone. And something about like just like the audio, like I feel like I remember it being kind of a similar thing to the fiddle, where it was like it was kind of it was kind of felt like it was right behind you, or it was really close by. You know, it wasn't like a far away thing. Something about that kind of captured the same like emotional thing for me, and I felt like that really captured like that kind of sense of being watched. And I feel like there's a way to kind of craft or manufacture that emotion, and I'm really wanting to capture that in my game. You know, I really want to make the player feel that way while they're playing the game at certain points. I mean, I feel like I want to have points that are, you know, more kind of silly and lighthearted, but I don't want that to be the whole game. I want it to be mostly dark and spooky with elements of comedy. You know, not that the game is going to be super scary, but, you know, just that it'll kind of make you feel a little bit eerie or like you're being watched, like I keep saying, or maybe a little bit on edge. You know, playing with mostly silence, I feel. You know, I feel like having most of the game not have music in most of the gameplay, I feel like could really amp that feeling. And then, of course, when there is music, it feels a little more jarring. Um, but I don't know. And I'm just kind of talking off the top of my head right now. But I don't exactly remember why I started talking about this. Um, I guess what I'm getting at is that I feel like with children's horror like Coraline, especially like when I listen to the audiobook version of it on Audible, not sponsored by the way. I feel like when I listen to the audiobook version of it, I kind of get that feeling a little bit. I guess what I'm trying to get at is that like I feel like children's horror allows me to play with that sort of emotional state in a kind of approachable way where horror it feels like inaccessible because it feels too overwhelming. Because you see, I have anxiety. I have I mean, it's not as bad as it was when I was a child, but I do have anxiety, and that I feel plays a big factor in why I have a hard time enjoying horror. You know, I get anxious quite easily watching horror things. I don't like feeling this sense of dread and and kind of this emotionally and mentally taxing sort of experience of watching horror. I feel like it kind of makes me feel exhausted. It makes me feel drained, and it makes me feel like really. It just kind of makes me feel sad. Honestly, a lot of times when I watch horror, I get sad after watching it because I'm like, well, that's a bummer, you know. I guess I just don't like the tragedy of it, you know. The I don't like the gruesome deaths and the violence and stuff, you know. And even though you know this is what I always kind of get pushback with from people is like, well, it's not real. It's like, yeah, I mean that's a good point. It isn't real, you know. I mean, in theory, logically, like it's not real. I shouldn't feel like too emotionally attached to it because they're characters. They're you know they're not real people. This didn't actually happen. But I still can't help but feel really empathetic for characters even though they're not real. I still feel really sad for them and I really want them to not have to go through those events. You know, I feel like it's hard for me to watch stuff like that without feeling, you know, feeling sad for the characters because I'm a deeply empathetic person. I've always been that way, you know. When I was a kid, I had a really hard time as a kid watching a lot of movies because I really didn't like watching characters die. It made me really sad when I was a kid. And it even kind of made me like, not like traumatized, but it just shook me a little bit, as a kid. Well, there's movies that, a lot of people have seen that I still have not watched, things like Jurassic Park and stuff, like where I'll say that I haven't watched it and people will be like, "What? You haven't watched blah blah blah? How have you not seen it?" And like, I don't know. I just like using Jurassic Park as an example. I don't like watching people get eaten by dinosaurs, and I don't know how much that actually happens in the movie, but I know that it does happen. And I really don't like that. I don't really like watching people get eaten live. Believe it or not, I don't find enjoyment out of watching that. It makes me sad. It makes me feel bad for the characters. And the pushback I always get with that example is, well, only the bad guys get eaten. It's like, well, it's still all the same for me because I still feel a sort of sense of, I feel compassion towards all humanity sometimes that maybe doesn't really account for whether you're the good guy or the bad guy. It's like I watch the bad guys die and I'm like, well, yeah, I know they were evil, but I didn't want them to die. It's almost kind of like an unsatisfying uh, outcome for me. I mean, I know that like maybe to some extent it's kind of like a, oh well, they got what they deserve, and it's kind of satisfying to watch them get what's coming for them. But I still can't help but kind of feel like, well, I don't know. Maybe I'd rather watch the character learn and grow and, become different and be able to have that depth of character and the capacity to change and be able to, be different and become a good guy. I feel like that for me is a lot more emotionally satisfying than just watching them get eaten alive by a dinosaur. It's hard for me to feel like it's hard for me to feel glee from watching things like that. I mean, I know I'm probably in the minority of that, which you wouldn't really think that that would be the case, but apparently a lot of people take glee or enjoyment sometimes out of watching violence and I guess people getting what they deserve. But I have a hard time watching that, and I think I've rattled on enough about that point, so I'm gonna move on now. See, I guess I just feel like sometimes there's a sort of uh, it feels like to me doing grotesque, violent horror has a bit of a cheapness to it, you know? It's kind of like the first thing that people do when something comes out you know how when Mickey Mouse became a public domain character, not like any iteration after the very first one, but when that very first Steamboat Willie iteration of Mickey Mouse, well, that wasn't the first iteration, but close enough. Uh, when that kind of became public domain, the first thing that people did was make a horror game or a horror movie out of it. And it kind of feels like, really, just like, are we not able to do anything better than that? Like, are we not able to kind of come up with new ideas or interesting ideas to do with that other than just violent, like, kind of cheap, like, horror movies? The same thing with, like, that Winnie the Pooh movie, and, they're making, like, a Peter Pan one or something. I feel like I feel like there's more creative things that we could do, but I feel like a lot of times those kind of things are often the majority, when it comes to like spooky or creepy things. A lot of it is like horror and jump scares and bloody murder. And it's like, well, why can't we explore other things in horror genres? Like, why does it have to always be violent and jump scares? Like, why can't we explore more emotional depth full themes, I guess? Why can't we explore more psychological things? I feel like that's why I appreciate things like Coraline a lot more, is because it kind of explores an emotional theme rather than a super hyper violent jump scary kind of thing. It's kind of got a little bit of it's got more suspense, and it feels more uh, thrilling, and kind of like, how is the character gonna pull through, rather than just like, oh, this character is just gonna die at the end. There's also something that I've been thinking about, which I feel like there's sort of a like exhausting, like, this just makes me feel bad. This just makes me feel really awful now. And it's something that I kind of experience a lot when I look at things like apocalypse, like disaster movies. I, while I find sometimes certain kinds of apocalyptic themed media, interesting and kind of fascinating, it always comes with this feeling of like emotional, like, it takes a lot of emotional, like, energy out of me to enjoy that kind of media. It just makes me feel like bummed out watching stuff like that. I don't feel super great after watching stuff like that. I'm just like, man, well, freaking, like, now I'm just bummed out. Everything sucks now, and not to mention that it's so, like, in your face all the time. There's so many disaster movies and apocalypse movies all throughout media, and it's almost kind of like vilified in a way. Like, it's just so all over the place. Everybody makes things about it. It's just like, and it's kind of exhausting, because it's like, well, I'm already, like, struggling with stress in real life. I already have responsibilities, and looking at how society is going makes me not feel great and stresses me out. And so it's like, I don't want another thing making me feel stressed out by watching this, like, apocalypse movie or horror movie. Like, why would I want to add more kind of, like, mental stress and strain by subjecting myself to this? Which, I mean, the counterpoint would be just don't watch it, which is fair. I mean, that's probably true. I could just not watch it. I mean, to be fair, there is kind of an extent of, like, it being just everywhere all the time. There's a lot of things like that where it's just kind of in your face, whether you like it or not. There's actually so many things like that on the internet, like, so many things that I just hate seeing, and I don't want to see it always being constantly shoved in my face all the time. It's like what the internet is built off of at this point, because corporations, ruin everything, and all that stuff. That's a topic for another video. Now, I guess, in all fairness, I should at least explore the other side of the conversation, because, it's not all about me. There are other points of view. So, I think, to my understanding, why I guess people might enjoy horror or other, kind of suspenseful thriller type media that I don't typically enjoy, I guess it is because, to my understanding, there's a bit of a cathartic. It's a bit of a cathartic way to experience those emotions in a safe way. similar to how I experience, you know, children's horror as a safe way to experience those emotional themes, but specifically about kind of horror genres. But I guess, like, with the larger genre of horror, it's more about experiencing those heavy emotional things, like, in general, in a safe-ish place. I don't consider it a super safe place, but I guess I could see how somebody might be able to just say, well, it's fiction, so it's a safer environment. It's not happening to me, so it's safer. And I mean, I guess that's fair. Um, so I do understand that there is an aspect of that for probably for people who do enjoy horror and stuff like that. I personally just cannot do that. I cannot deal. It's just a lot for me, for my little boy heart to handle sometimes. I think ultimately the reason I struggle with like mainline horror and just like the larger genre is just because I'm just a very soft person. You know, and I'm not saying that in like a emasculating way. I just mean it in like a I'm just a very sympathetic, compassionate person. I have a big heart that it's easy. It's not hard for me to feel empathetic towards things. Like I'm the kind of person who bumps into an inanimate objects and then apologizes to it. Like I bump into the wall, and I'm like, oh, I'm so sorry, man. And then I realize that I'm talking to the wall. It's not that's the amount of empathy that I have. I have a hard time, uh, you know, I don't like making people feel bad. I don't like making people feel sad, I guess. And other things that rhyme. I'm just a very tender person. That's something that I was always described as when I was growing up. I always had people describing me as tender, um, which is a very interesting choice of word. I kind of wonder why that word specifically. Um, but I think I've probably rambled on long enough, and I think I've ran out of things to talk about. So I'm gonna end it here. But if anybody resonates with what I've been talking about, or experiences the same thing that I'm experiencing this way, feel free to let me know and comment on the video, because I would like to hear your thoughts, because I sometimes feel like I'm the only one, and I kind of, I mean, I know that other people probably understand what I'm talking about, but I kind of want to hear other people's experiences about it. So, but with that, I will see you all in the next video, which will come out whenever I feel like, I guess. Bye bye.